Welcome to Powerhouse. Joining us today, we have Amy Powell. She's the co-founder of Toast, a wine subscription service.
Hi, Joyce.
Cool.
Happy to be here.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. Let's just start with a quick overview of how you got to your current position.
Right now, I recently launched a subscription-based wine business called Toast here in Hong Kong, along with a partner of mine, Christina Lau Tam. It's a bit of a circuitous path to get here. So in general, like my career has mostly been in the hospitality industry. But when I moved to Hong Kong almost 6 years ago with my husband, I actually went away from the wine industry, which is where I've been working before, because at the time in 2014, the economy here in Hong Kong was not doing so great on the luxury retail side, which affected the wine sector. So all these great wine jobs I thought I was going to have when I arrived just didn't exist. And so through a bit of happenstance, I got introduced to the director of marketing at the time for Four Seasons Hong Kong, and ended up actually going to work as a director of PR and communications at the hotel there. Was there for over 4 years, had an incredible journey. And then just about a year ago, decided it was time for my next step. And here we are. We launched our business in a fantastic time. but yeah, it's been quite a journey so far for the last about 6 months since we launched the business last fall.
And it could be great timing. Everyone's kind of home and wanted to, have a bit more sampling of food and wine. Maybe talk a little bit more. Is that like, how did you get into your initial career?
Yeah. So I mean, it's such a silly origin story, but I grew up in a very small town in California. And I started reading the LA Times when I was 11. So I was quite a precocious reader, and I loved the travel section. And I think when you grow up in a small town and you see all these beautiful pictures of places around the world and islands and whatever, I was like, oh, I want to travel. I want to get out of here. I should be a hotel manager. So I was like very set on being a hotel manager from the age of 11. At least where I was from, that was not a thing. Like, people did not become hotel managers. So all anybody knew was that Cornell University was the best place to go in the US for hospitality administration, which I know you went to Cornell too. So go Big Red.
Big Red, yes.
So I became like very single-mindedly focused on that from like a young age, which I did. I went there, had an incredible experience, but realized pretty soon I was working at the front desk of the hotel on campus, the Statler, for a couple of years. Did summer jobs, working at spas. I worked at a winery. I bartended on campus at a couple of bars that I'm sure you remember. And through all that, I was like, I actually just don't want to do operations. I don't want to be like the person on the floor. I think I still love the industry, but I didn't really know how to translate that into, if you're not going to be the manager, what other kinds of jobs are there out there? So by the time I graduated, I took a very open-ended approach to, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'll take the opportunities that come my way. It happened to be with beverages. So I loved food. I loved wine. I always loved to cook. Had gotten more into wine and beverages in general when I was in university. As I mentioned, I worked at a winery over one summer during break. And I met this guy actually while I was working at a spa who owned a beverage company. And so I first went working for him, selling high-end bottled water to restaurants in New York. So it was all the old guard French restaurants when they still existed in New York City, which was this great kind of, feet on the street position when you're like a young person just out of college. You want to learn the city, you want to learn people, you want to feel like you're part of something. I mean, it was hard work, but it was a great way to learn New York and get to know a lot of people really fast. And then later a tea company, which took me back out to the West Coast. So I worked for the Republic of Tea for 5 years, managing the western part of the United States for a high-end bottled tea that again was sold just to restaurants and hotels. And then I met my now husband, John Wood, and while we were both in California, we decided to move back to New York, which was a great return to come back at a different point in life with a partner. And so then I went more seriously into the wine business. I worked for one of the top French wine importers in the United States. My husband will call it like my master's degree in wine education, because selling high-end wine to a bunch of snobby sommeliers in New York, you have to really know your stuff. So, I knew wine before, but I really had to level up my knowledge in order to play on that kind of field. So it was a really interesting couple of years. And here we are today.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like some of the opportunities were they hard to come by? And how did you get, like, let's say the one going back to New York and getting back into kind of your love of wine industry. Was that very hard to find, and you really have to look for the right person or like right company?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's almost more important who you're working for than what you're
Mm,
doing. And so in that case, the man who recruited me for that job, he actually saw a lot of merit in my past experience working in the water business of all things. He knew what
right.
a hard industry that was, how competitive it was. He's like, look,
Mm,
if you can survive selling water in a place like New York City, in New England, he's like, you can probably be very good at this job in another competitive environment. So
right.
he cared less about, even though I did come with some wine experience, which was important, he
Mhm.
saw the value in what I'd done in my past work and said he thought I could be successful in that job. But yeah,
Mm,
I guess I've been lucky in that I've tended to take jobs or taken opportunities where the people see something in me as a person and they see the potential of what I can bring to that role. And when you have that, I know you're going to have a lot of support from the people that you're working for.
right. And how do you feel like for someone that's looking, or going to switch industries or looking to get into something they're interested, how do you capture that, I guess, or how do you show the potential?
First of all, just like being interested in a lot of things. I mean, I should also mention too that when I was in New York originally, so right out of university, I also went to culinary school.
Right.
I had this like dream I was going to be a food writer. So I was always doing
Yeah.
a little bit of food writing and creative work on the side. And then I
Right.
was doing the beverage sales as a way to kind of stay involved in the business side.
Mhm.
And I think to this day, I still have those kind of two parts of my brain, which is I have this very creative side and I also have the really business side, and I actually like both. But it builds a portfolio. It kept me engaged. It fed something in my soul, and I might not have known exactly where that was going to take me, but I
Mhm.
always pursued those things along the way. And then again, eventually, it all kind of comes together in different ways you don't really expect. In
Mhm.
terms of how you meet the people that are eventually going to give you those opportunities, networking is just so important. And I don't
Mhm.
mean networking in the go to a networking event and take a bunch of cards and follow
Right.
somebody on LinkedIn. That's a really superficial, I think, empty kind of networking. I
Yeah.
mean the genuine kind of like if you were leaving your job. So like when I left Four Seasons over a year ago, I had all these people I met great people through that job, and
Mhm.
some people just because the nature of my job was so busy, you meet interesting people along the way, be like, I want to spend some more time with that person, but I just like haven't had time to do that. So I just made a point of reaching out to all these people that I met and thought were interesting. I'm like, hey, do you have time for coffee? We'd love to just like tell you what I'm up to now, and
Mhm.
no agenda, just zero agenda. Like, let's just have a chat, and I would like to hear what you're doing too. And you'd be shocked how many of those kind of meetings can lead to things along the way.
How did you come up with the idea of Toast and started that company?
Well, as one would expect with a wine company, it started
Mhm.
over some wine.
Awesome.
My partner, Christina, had been writing, she'd been doing some food writing. So she's also in communications and corporate communications.
Mhm.
But she'd been doing some food writing on the side, or not food writing, sorry, wine writing for Lifestyle Asia and for Foodie Magazine here in Hong Kong. I'd met her through Four Seasons for that reason. She'd
Mhm.
come to a couple of our events that we'd done that were wine related. We'd hit it off. We had obviously a similar passion for wine and both
Yeah.
come from California, so we kind of have a similar background. And so yeah, so we were having dinner one night with our husbands, and she'd been kind of thinking about like how to transition all this writing she'd been doing into a portfolio, but she's like, what I'd really like to do, I just want to start like a wine club, like the kind of thing that I would like want to be a member of, but I just don't find here in Hong Kong, and something to finance some buying trips to Europe. I was like,
Yep.
oh, I want to do that. I was like, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was May of last year, so May of 2019. I had to have a couple more serious conversations about it. And through that, we did some serious research, because one thing that you want to
Right.
say like, oh, we want a wine club, but you really
Right.
need to survey the market, survey your friends, try to figure out what exactly is a right kind of wine club. Is that something Hong Kongers even want, or just us? If it's just us, then it's not a business.
Right.
So we spent some time researching, coming up with the branding. We really put a lot of thought into the whole brand around Toast. It took us
Mhm.
several months to kind of nail all of that down, get the packaging right. Like we want people to feel good about this product, that you're excited when the box comes to your door every month.
Right.
And so yeah, but It's a relatively low cost startup model. And so we were actually able to go from idea to implementation by November of last year. So
Wow.
from first idea, like first inkling of an idea in May, and by November we had our launch party.
What's the hardest part of that process?
I think just like you do when it's a startup and it's two of you, you do everything yourselves. I mean,
Mhm.
we don't need a lot of financing right now, so it's not like we need to go.
Mhm.
Our model doesn't require we have tons of employees at the moment, but
Right.
are just two of us. So like if your computer breaks down, you've got to figure it out yourself. You take your own computer down to the Genius Bar at Apple. You don't hand it off to your IT department and they fix it. There are people you can hire to help and support, and you should definitely do that. And we figure out where our time is most valuably spent. But it's really two people doing everything, coming from a big company before this where you had teams of people who were experts in different areas that I could lean on and did lean on.
Wow. And in terms of the research, you mentioned talked to friends and did your own research. But what is the biggest part that kind of really helps cement the idea and say this is it? We've found that right opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we put together a survey. So we sent out a survey to, we hand selected friends who we thought would be good
Mm.
candidates for this kind of idea. And then we just asked them really specific questions about how often do you drink? What's the price point of the bottles that you normally drink? How, how open are you to trying new wines? I mean, the kinds of questions that would help frame like what is it that our customers as a
Mhm.
subset of Hong Kongers would be looking for in a service like this? What are they not getting from the wine industry as it exists right now in Hong Kong, where we can maybe fill in a gap? Because what we saw was a perceived gap in the market. Here in Hong Kong, if you love to drink Bordeaux and Burgundy, I mean, there's so much of that going around and plenty of
Mhm.
people who would love to help take your money off your hands and provide you with some really gorgeous high-end stuff.
Mhm.
But that's not most of us. I mean,
Right.
most of us, even if you're a wine drinker, you're not drinking that kind of wine every single night. You're
Right.
not drinking Bordeaux every night. At least I'm not. And then there's the drinker who's like, I like wine. I go to Marks and Spencer's and I pick up a bottle after work, and kind of indifferent. Like wine is wine. It's good. It's good.
Mhm.
But I don't really
Mhm.
think too much about it. And then there's just like this whole lot of people who are somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
And for a variety of reasons, I think they don't get necessarily the same kind of service here in Hong Kong. And I think a lot of it has to do with real estate, but you don't have a
Mhm.
lot of these kind of boutique wine shops like you would
Right.
in San Francisco or London, where your shop owner knows your name and says, "Hey, Joyce, how did you like that Chenin
Mhm.
Blanc last time? I've got this really cool, Roussanne I think you would love."
Mhm.
You don't end up with that same kind of personal relationship here. So people tend to get very stuck in their same style of drinking. So it's like, I know I like Sauvignon Blanc, so I go buy Sauvignon Blanc. I know I like this particular Burgundy, so I get that every time. That doesn't mean those drinkers don't want to try new wines. They just don't really know how to do it in a way that they can feel confident about. So we want to say like, hey, how can this subscription model? You have confidence in us. Hopefully,
Mhm.
we earn your confidence through
Mhm.
you liking the wines that we ship to you every month. And
Mhm.
then that gives you the opportunity to try a lot of wines you've probably never been exposed to before. With it,
Mhm.
we have a preference for helping our members find wines from Sardinia, from Sicily, from the Priorat region of Spain,
Mhm.
from small up and coming winemakers in Australia and Tasmania who are making wine in styles that maybe you wouldn't expect to have out of Australia. So we're trying to reframe how people think about things, and because they trust us, they're
Mhm.
really wide open when they get that box every month to be just like excited to open the bottle and learn something a little bit on the way.
Right. And how do you market it so far? Is it mostly online social media, or are there other ways to kind of get into that?
Yeah, when we knew we were coming up on our launch event, so we had a couple setbacks in the fall,
Mhm.
some strangely related to the protests in terms of like
Mhm.
production delays. So we knew we were at the end. It looked like we were going to make our first shipment in December. So what we did was a series of small events leading up to that as a kind of like, again, like also getting feedback from people at the same time. So we had some very nice friends who would host parties. They invite their friends over. We provide the wine. everyone kind of sits around and mingle, and we talk a little bit about the wine. You know, we learn, but in a non-snobby way. And
Right.
spend the rest of the night just, you know, drinking and chatting. And so we were able to sign up quite a few people in the, like, before we'd even launched. So we had a
Oh,
really
wow.
nice base of subscribers before the first shipment even went out. Now, with the success of that, you know, our business plan for this year, our marketing plan had largely involved doing events. And then in comes the coronavirus.
Right.
All goes out the window. So,
Wow.
you know, we had always intended to make digital marketing, you know, a big part of what we do, like, you know, as a long-term strategy, but we just had to front load all of that. And then now hopefully at some point we can go back to doing events again this year. But until then, we're obviously not just going to sit around and wait for the business to come to us. We know we're still in this brand building mode, awareness building mode. So we put a lot of effort into our monthly newsletters that go out to our subscribers, but you don't have to be a subscriber to subscribe to our newsletters. Some great content in there. So we put a lot of effort into the website content, doing recipes, articles, and then really solid, like, again, fun way of learning about wine when we send our newsletter every month about what's coming in the upcoming box. So that's one aspect of it. We've experimented a bit with social media advertising. Obviously, we're doing organic as well. We've done a bit of PR, not a ton. So like what we've had from PR has been terrific, and it's mostly organic. Again, because we can't really host a big press event right now, you know, we've been limited on that. But as you pointed out earlier, with these times with people staying at home more, luckily there's been a lot of content out that's being produced here on different websites and platforms about how people can get home delivery. So we're able to slot into some of those articles really well. So the PR has been quite good without us actually needing to do very much in order to get it, just because of the timing. So that's been terrific. And also I had pre-existing relationships with a lot of the press here in Hong Kong. It's been just great to have them be so enthusiastic about what we're doing, including some of them buying wine from us.
Right.
That's the ultimate.
That's great. Right, exactly. They're like, oh, it's great, I'll subscribe. Then that's the best thing. Yeah. So were there any point in time, and it doesn't have to be obviously while you're setting up Toast, but throughout your career, any point in time you feel like, you know, this is really hard, I just want to give up, or I want to do something else, and how did you pivot out of that?
Yeah, I think we all have that. Let's face it. Unless you're just blessed with having the perfect job at all points in your life, I hate you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, most of us are going to go through that at some point or another, and some
Yeah.
of it's stuff that's out of your control. And I think that's when it's most challenging. It's either difficulties with a boss, or I think a lot of people right now in this environment, it's just not necessarily a fun time to be working when you're so hampered, especially if you're in like a marketing type role. I mean, what are you really, you know, it can be quite frustrating in an environment like this.
Right.
But I think for me, like, since you had asked me before about kind of what is there a specific thing that stands out in my mind, I would say I had a job with a very difficult boss who was quite, let's just call it, emotionally volatile. And that was always a challenge. It was tough because I really liked the work. I liked the job. I liked the work. I liked my team. And so those factors really kept me around. But when you have a difficult boss, that's, you know, after a period of time, there's only so much you can handle. And, you know, we'd had a particularly heated conversation one day which involved a lot of finger pointing and yelling and stuff on the part of my boss, you know, really unprofessional behavior and stuff that I don't really think anyone should have to be subjected to in a work environment. And frankly, I was ready to resign, walk out right there. I mean, I had to consider that. I'm like,
Right.
is this a place I can come back to tomorrow, even though I love all these other aspects of what I do?
Right.
And then ultimately, I was in the middle of two projects that were really important to me, and I thought they were important to me personally and professionally. And I really wanted to see them through. So it was, even though that was tough, it was a tough decision. That, to me, in the end, I just superseded whatever this difficulty was with my boss. So from there, it was, okay, if I need to see through these projects and it's going to take me another 6 to 7, 8 months maybe to see these projects out, what am I going to do to manage my mental health from now until then? How am I going to manage when I'm in conversations with this difficult boss to not let that person's behavior affect me so personally. So yeah, so one analogy my husband and I often use is it's like when you go into a conversation with a person like that, is you want to kind of float above the chessboard, we call it in the conversation, which is like,
Right.
rather than being like marred deep down, like in the emotional part of whatever's happening with those words, is to really like take a high level view of what you're trying to accomplish. If you're above the chessboard and you can see those moves that you need to make, like this conversation is just one step, it's just one move as you're trying to get to your ultimate goal on that chessboard, which for me was finishing those projects. So just trying to keep a real long-term perspective, trying to detach my emotions from the emotions of that individual,
Hmm.
and then do a lot of stuff on my own to manage my mental health. I mean, just
Right.
meditation, running is really important to me. Being out in nature, I find very restorative. So making sure I have that time to really balance out with friends and personal life, and really try to find a way to separate that work life from the time you have outside of work.
Oh, that's great. And it's great that you, because of those two projects that you're interested in, you just kind of made a decision to stick it out and just really just, even though it's a difficult situation, complete it. And, at least you have that part that you feel successful and feel, good
Absolutely.
about, and then move on. And you mentioned a bit about, running and exercising. Is
Yeah.
that how you like to unwind? And what else would you like to do on your kind of relaxing time?
A big part of what we do, and I'm so lucky to be married to someone who also likes to run and hike. We feel that way all the time.
Right.
So every weekend we're out doing something, and of course
Mhm.
these days with a more flexible schedule and just life in general being a bit more flexible,
Yeah.
with work, that we're out a lot during the week, and I think it's especially during this time of coronavirus too. Like it's amazing that when you feel cooped up inside and you don't have that kind of daily connection and interactivity with people that you would normally have, just being able to get out onto one of the so many hiking trails here in the city,
Yeah.
and just surrounded by nature, you can feel like you're miles away within a few minutes of leaving your home. So I think that's really important. I read a lot, so I'm a big reader. We read tons of books. I read 40 books last year. I think I'm probably on track to reading 50 or 60 this year. So
Wow, that's amazing.
that's a
One a week
lot.
almost. Wow.
Meditation I got into probably about a year and a half ago. So I'm not as diligent as I would like, but I do
Mhm.
find, particularly during times of stress, taking that 10-15 minutes a day to pop on, something on your app, whatever app you choose, is
Mhm.
incredibly restorative.
Any latest book recommendation?
Oh, we've had so many good books this year. It's like a wealth of good books. The first book we read this year was definitely still one of my favorites. Ben Lerner's The Topeka School, which got a lot of
Mhm.
attention when it came out last year. Just think is an absolutely brilliant book. Have read some other interesting things. One called There, about a contemporary Native American community in California. Another kind of, and then we also like dipping into older books too. And I've been trying to revisit some people that maybe we have a tendency to get so focused, I think, book lovers, on whatever's the latest that's out, but
Mhm. Yeah.
there's actually a lot of stuff that came out a long time ago, and there's a reason they're classics. So I just
Right.
read Willa Cather, who's famous American novelist, her book Death Comes for the Archbishop, which I just think is so beautifully written. I think if anyone is thinking about being a writer and you want to understand how to write about a landscape, how to capture a character in a couple of sentences, I mean, this book is just brilliant. I mean, my copy is just like there's underlines on like almost every page. She just has so many gorgeous turns of phrase, so
Yeah.
many memorable characters and characterizations. Highly recommend that one.
Well, great. Thanks. And you mentioned obviously you're going to be a mom, soon to be mom. How do
Yeah.
you feel, and how do you feel? You basically have two babies. You have a new business and a baby to come. How do you feel like you can balance the work and life?
You might need to come back to me in a few months and ask me
Yeah,
how it's going.
that's true.
I'm really lucky that my business partner Christina, she's got a 15-month-old baby
Mhm.
girl, and while we've been building this business, either she's been a new mom with a baby, or
Right.
I've been pregnant. So I
Right.
think we have a lot of sympathy for each other.
Right.
And it was actually a real blessing to have a job with your own business with a lot of flexibility,
Right.
particularly during the first trimester when I don't know about you when you were pregnant, but I mean, you just have these days where I just felt like I literally was getting like sucked down into the ground. I was so tired, and
Mhm.
you just give yourself permission to take that nap in the middle of the afternoon. And you know what? The work will still be there when you wake up. It's your own business. Nobody,
Exactly.
no one's telling you when to clock in and clock out. And when it's your own business, you'll work as late as you need to work in order to get the job done. So I took that nap. I took a lot
Yeah.
of naps.
Yeah.
So I think that was like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
But
And
that
I
is
think
the
that
benefit of your own business. So absolutely.
And I think, when we'll see how it goes with the baby, but we're lucky again. Living in Hong Kong, we have a lot of
Yeah.
help,
Yeah.
and that'll make things much easier, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other advice for a listener in terms of either switching career from corporate to entrepreneur or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, I love like coaching young people right out of college, but I think the advice I give them really applies to anybody who's thinking about a career change. Like, first of all, I, I mean, I'm in my late 30s. I'm going to live for a long time, God willing, and so will most of us. Just the
Hmm.
benefit of being alive in the way age we are.
Right.
So this idea that you're going to come out of university and know exactly what you're going to do, and you're going to do that job, and you're going to be on this set career path for the rest of your life. I mean, it's just I think it puts too much pressure on people. So, there is no one right way to have a career, and your career is probably going to change several times over your life, and that's not a bad thing. So don't be afraid of the non-traditional career path. As I told you in the beginning, like I just kind of took chances on jobs and people took chances on me. And the way I always approach a job whenever I go into it is I will stay here. There's usually something that has to attract me to it in the first place. Like, do I think I'm going to learn something from this job? And if the answer is yes, then I always tell the employer too. A lot of people, especially here in Hong Kong, are very blunt, like, how long do you plan to stay here? Which is a fair question. But I'm like, as long as I'm happy, as long as we're happy as a couple. But from a career standpoint, from a job standpoint, to say, I always look for these criteria. I say, as long as I'm continuing to learn and to grow in that job, if I am being recognized for the work that I do and compensated fairly. If the job continues to meet that criteria, and of course, reassessing every 6 months to a year is probably a good idea. And you do need to put in some time with a job, I think, in order to give it a fair
Right.
chance. But
Yep.
if you've been in that role for 2, 3 years and one of those criteria is not being met anymore, then it's a good time to take a look and say, hey, is it time to make a move? And then
Mhm.
I think you can fairly like work with your employer and say, I've done what I can. This has been a great experience. It's time for me to move on to something, and you'll find somebody else that will be better for this role. And for both of us, this could be a good place to move on. So yeah, I just said, don't be afraid of the non-traditional career path. It'll take you. There is no way when you get out of university that you have any idea where your career is going to end up in 20 to 30 years.
Mhm.
So it's better just not to have a picture of that and be open minded, experience career and life as an opportunity to grow, and then you'll get to that place you could have never imagined.
And any next steps for the business?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to the slow reopening of Hong Kong.
Yep.
A lot of some interesting partnerships that were on our plate before these restrictions went in place. So I'm hoping that as things kind of open up and people feel safe to go out and mingle again with events, that we're going to be able to interact more with our members and bring in new people. We really want to build up a community of wine lovers. So we've got some interesting projects going on with wine education for women in business. I think there's a real opportunity for women, particularly on the top level, who are in circumstances where they need to entertain. Unfortunately, I don't know your experience, Joyce, but like even though I'm in the wine business, I will go out to dinner with my husband. I will be the one that orders the wine, and then they still bring it to him to taste. So, there's still a lot of biases that go into the
Right.
service side. So, like, we want to empower women through education to be able to take control when you're in entertaining, when you're really in any environment, to say, like, you have enough education, you have
Mhm.
enough confidence to talk to the sommelier. You should not be afraid of ordering the wine yourself, and you don't need to
Right.
hand off the wine list to your colleague.
Right.
Just
Exactly.
so that's one kind of thing we're looking at, and also just
That's great.
want to bring wine to people in a fun way. So we're looking at a
Mm.
lot of different stuff. Another great one we're looking at, we can't wait to do, is a mindful wine experience. So we're going to be doing wine and meditation together. with my old colleague from who when we used to work at the Four Seasons, Shoshana Weinberg, who's a terrific meditation instructor. So the second we're all allowed to gather again, that'll be probably the first thing that's up.
That sounds amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce.